In this essential series, we're going to be giving short, simple insights designed to help everybody navigate the real stuff. No fluff, just practical guidance so that all of you can move forward with some clarity. And as always, none of this stuff is going to save the world, but I can promise it won't make it worse. Welcome to Outsider Information. I am your host, Brandon, and your strategic partner here with OIAS. As always, give a like, subscribe, engage, get cozy, right? We've been here for a couple of these episodes, and check out the website. I think it's pretty great. Drink of the episode is still water. It is essential, not just to life, but to tea as well. So we are sticking with the theme of essentials by having an essential drink. Disclaimer at the bottom, once again, for this entire series, none of this is supposed to be interpreted as legal advice, especially this episode in particular. If you are an individual who needs to know their rights in the workplace or has questions about a situation pertaining to employment law, I would highly advise contacting a lawyer with that specialty to your specific state. This episode in particular is going to talk a little bit about why you don't want to find yourself in that position as we go through discipline and the employee relations process, which is a bit of a broad term, and that was kind of that's what we called it at the organization I was at. A lot of companies struggle with this because they are inconsistent, because they don't follow their own policies that are on the books, and it leads to inconsistencies. And it's important because, much like the disclaimer I said above, you don't want an employment lawyer knocking on your door with a lawsuit saying that you wrongly terminated somebody. Just a messy process. So let's talk about it. What is the employee relations process? Again, that is how it was defined at the organization I was with. There could be other terms. How you want to use it, really up to you. It doesn't matter as long as it is consistent. Now, in the role that I had, I didn't exclusively handle employee relations cases on this level. I did leaves, accommodations, and work comp, but a lot of times there was some crossover with employee relations cases, so I had to cross my notes, in addition to having a doctoral degree in the subject and seeing a lot of this on an operational level. But enough about me. You are here for the good stuff. Now, it varies by company, but the process, the employee relations process, should be very clear and defined. If it's not, you're going to have problems, and that is where companies screw themselves up. They don't hold people to the same standard, and that is an issue that starts at the very top and bleeds down, because if one person doesn't care and it's not a problem, others are not going to care, and it's going to become a bigger problem. People are human beings, and human beings love to push boundaries and see what they can get away with. And if those boundaries are floating, people are going to know exactly when and how they can move to different aspects of the room that they're in to avoid those boundaries that exist. And issues tend to arise. Having rules, it's the easiest way to prevent a disaster and prevent legal nightmares because your process isn't defined. Now, let's talk about some myths and some realities, right? Myth. People don't like structure. The reality is, yes, they do. You know why? Because having structure in place makes everyone's job a whole lot easier. You know exactly what you can and you can do. Myth. If we raise our standards, that people won't want to work for us. Also false. While nobody really wants to work, people have to work. And if you have standards, structures in place, people will gravitate to that because it simplifies things. And even if it's not something that they like, as long as it doesn't clash with a value of theirs, they're going to be fine. People complain, and people are not going to be upset working for somebody that has standards. That's basically what a uniform at work is. That is a standard, right? Myth number 3, we can't flag everything. You don't have to. We're not flagging people for chewing bubble gum. We're flagging people for being late, uniform violations, inappropriate conduct in the workplace. The stuff that matters. You don't have to nitpick, right? You just need to make sure that the things that you're enforcing are consistent and equitable across the board. Last myth, and there's probably others, but we're just doing 4. It is hard to be the bad guy. Not if you have the support and you have the rules in place. Yeah, is it difficult being the bad guy if other people don't care? Of course. But if you've got the structure, if you've got the support, all you've got to do is say, it's in the rules, right? I don't make them. I just have to enforce them. People behave the way that they are allowed to. And as I said before, discipline and structure makes everyone's job a whole lot easier. Now, If you don't have consistency, a lot of bad things can happen, right? Let's say you want to fire somebody. Well, now you can't because you don't have a process. Or if you do have a process and it wasn't followed, that potentially could be a wrongful termination suit. And those are a nightmare to have land on your desk. If you don't have consistency, management can't manage. If people above you don't care, the people below you certainly can't enforce something because they can just go around you to get what they want. This is the one that's really common. Really good employees become resentful employees. They see somebody constantly getting away with something and the standard's not held to task. Maybe they're not being held to a higher standard, but that person is disrupting the ability to get work done, and people don't like that. Your reputation could tank. You could get sued. It's just not a good place to be, and this is straight from the heart right here. It is a headache for your friends in HR. Now, while HR certainly has its fair share of problems, the processes we have in place are designed to basically help you navigate this. In a good situation, a normal HR situation, you don't have to worry about disciplining somebody. You just have to write it up and report it to us, and we will take care of the rest. That is the employee relations process and how we did it. Your HR department, if you don't get something written up and you come to us and say, hey, I think we need to fire this person, we are going to look in the documents. We are going to see that you haven't written this person up, but you're going to tell us that they've been late 10 times in the last 2 months. And we are going to be asking why you didn't tell us after this happened on the second or third time. Because now we have to start the process from zero. That is essentially going to be a written warning. And now they have to go through the whole process again, which can sometimes take months. Can't just terminate people in this world anymore. You have to have a process, and that is what this is for. Having a discipline structure that can work isn't as difficult as it sounds, right? If you have it in your employee handbook, that's all you need. That's literally all you need, and it just has to be followed. Now, in athletics, in my world, it worked a little bit different because conduct detrimental, that was our silver bullet. So if you could flag somebody for conduct detrimental, that's a very broad term that you can use to get somebody away from your situation. But sports is different. We had collective bargaining unions, not at the level I was at, but that is typically how pro sports worked, is you have a union that bargains all that out, and conduct detrimental built into the contracts. And a regular external organization, that is your employee handbook. That is where all that would be. So if you want to say and flag for conduct detrimental, you can define that any way you want. You can have it in there, and if people act to be unbecoming of the representation of your organization, you can use that as you see fit. What I would recommend and have recommend is a system of tiers that allow you to basically have a point system that navigates people through the process. Again, you just have to follow it. But let's say tier 1, that's a verbal warning. Tier 2, that could be a verbal or a written depending on where they are at in the points. Tier 3 could be a written or a suspension depending on where they're at in the points. And if you commit a Tier 4 offense, that is an instant term. You can have all of that built into your process if you have it documented and you have people following it. That is all it is. The law doesn't govern, the state or federal law does not govern over your employee handbook unless you are doing something illegal. But how you discipline in your organization, as long as it is fair and equitable, doesn't matter. You can have whatever rules you want to make sure you have the environment that best represents what you want to project as an organization. It is 100% yours. But remember, how you apply it will determine organizational success. You can go too far with it. I'm not advocating for what would be prison conditions, but you do need to have rules and regs in place so that things do function properly and so that they can be followed. You don't want it too complex. You don't want it too lax. You want people to understand what the standards are. And it is a lot easier to have those standards than it is to not have those standards. It really is. Like, just think about how hard it is to discipline somebody who's never been disciplined. Teachers, coaches. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, where you can tell that this person gets no structure at home and they are relying on them to get it from you. Yeah, don't be that place. Have your standards, set them, make people rise up to them. And don't let human nature come into the equation. Look, if that person who is a really good employee has been there for a while and they slip up, you still got to go through the process. And they will understand, look, we got to go through the process, right? If you start giving too much wiggle room for people, you're going to have problems, because then everybody's going to expect it. And if it's discovered ever in court that you are giving wiggle room to some but not all, you have a problem on your hands. Everyone has to be held to the same standard. That is the way it has to be. And people will rise to the level that you set if you set it. And if they don't, then they don't get to work for you. It is as simple as that. Okay, that's it. As always, nothing here is designed to save the world, but if it does help make your world a little less worse, that means we are winning. So give a like, subscribe, engage, check out the website, and we will see you next time.